Hey guys, welcome back to another Realm of the Mad God video. This is going to be quest chest opening number 12? Either number 12 or number 13, probably number 12. Yeah, so I decided because of a large influx of marks, since the popping servers are kind of coming back again, they're not getting DDoSed anymore, I was able to actually go back to doing double resets here and there, but not all the time. So I did collect quite a bit of... Yes, I forgot I had a Realm Eye offer for Rainbow Pots because I'm trying to refill up on... I've lost quite a bit of 8/8s, I think about a total of 15 deaths now, so I'm trying to rebuild, and that's why I'm trying to pump back up on the quest chest because I do get a lot of my pots that way. So for this episode, we're gonna get right into it. I don't know exactly how many, or what topic I want to talk about again like usual, but I'm not actually looking for anything in particular since at the moment my priority is just to refill up on the rainbow potions. Actually, okay, this is gonna trigger a lot of people, but I'm not picking up any life or mana because I have too many of those from Oryx 3 and his minions as a life pot. And as much as I would like to, actually maybe I'll keep the life pots because I can at least exchange them for something good, but we have too many mana pots, so I'm not going to use those. Anyways, have you guys been? Hope you've been enjoying Oryx 3. The previous episode that I've recorded was a long time ago. I just have sort of a scheduled upload with how I want to get my uploads in, but because I was initially anticipating for Oryx 3, or I was going to upload my regular next quest chest opening video sometime recently. It's just that when Oryx 3 came out, I basically cut my entire schedule to factor in for the Oryx 3 videos, which is why it took so long for this one to come out, because by the time you see this video, chances are it's going to be much further into the future, and so I apologize for that. But I was able to get a bunch of chests, and hopefully I need to move all this stuff. There's been a lot of people actually complaining about how Oryx 3 was too great of a spike in difficulty, and jeez, I keep forgetting that there's chests there. I can kind of understand that because we're not used to that sort of, I guess, strength yet. For the most part, Oryx 3 makes the void look like a pirate cave. I mentioned in the previous episode that the power creep for equipment scaling was sort of necessary because we would need it, especially if we were going to go ahead and continue satisfying the player's craving for progression and whatnot. But there were people who were complaining that the difficulty spike was too high from the Void Entity or Crystal Cavern to Oryx 3. Admittedly so, I think I kind of have to agree that it wasn't, not that it was too high, but it was a very large gap in difficulty because most of the time, it didn't really matter too much because the difficulty for even things like Void Entity, which we used to think was super hard, got very simple, right, as time went on, and we didn't care too much about it. But I have a feeling that Oryx 3 himself will start to become more elementary, but the thing is, the main difference between Oryx 3 and the Void Entity is because O3 is so punishing towards mistakes and whatnot, given with like all the things that are happening, all the bullets flying around. Is this just the highest drop rate ST or something? Oh my goodness. Back to what I was saying before though. I don't really think Oryx 3 will ever become easy. This is a very stacked bag. Easy in the sense that it will always be very, like, you can't autopilot O3. No matter how experienced you are at it, you do have to focus when you're in the dungeon since there's just so much happening at the same time. And some people don't like that. People, especially for MMORPGs and games like just PvEs, they would like for once difficult content to be sort of trivialized because that sort of makes progression a little bit easier for other people to kind of, not really progression, but people just sort of like that when something that was once difficult gets easier over time, right? Since you don't want to have to put in the same kind of stress and effort into that dungeon for as long as you live, as long as you continue playing the game. White bag, fire dragon battle. Okay, that's not bad. There are definitely worse white bags out there. A lot of G-Sorks too. I remember though, when I was looking up on Reddit and I saw someone complaining, as well as in my own live stream, someone was complaining that when they removed the save spot for Celestial, that Deca was intentionally making the game unfun to play, which I found just extremely, like, illogical because the save spot makes the boss harder or easier than it normally would be, right? Like, having to dodge, that's the whole essence of a bullet hell game. That's the essential experience. But for some reason, a person or several people were complaining that because there was no easy solution to a difficult phase, that's just Deca's way of intentionally making the game unfun. And that kind of boggles my mind, because there's something interesting about us gamers in that we know the game more than the developers do themselves, right? But unlike developers, we have no idea what we want. And when I say that, I don't mean that like we gamers are dumb or anything like that. It's just that it takes a different set of lens, right? It takes a different perspective from like to be a game designer versus being a player. Whenever you're a player for a game, you have a different mindset towards the game, since your goal is to partake in whatever game you're playing. This is a terrible key. Whereas the developers, their prerogative is to create a game that players will consume. And so there's sort of a paradox with gamers who try to offer suggestions and feedback, and not saying that our opinion is completely invalidated. We still offer very valuable feedback because we are the ones consuming the game. But those who believe that they know what's best for the game may not always be true. They may not always be correct, because it usually just depends on what kind of viewpoint you have on the game. Some people, especially in certain games that have a very vocal community, let's say League of Legends or other competitive games, that complain about X character being super overpowered, or Y character being really weak and needs to get buffed, or some mechanic being really stupid and needs to be reworked and stuff like that. And even some small fixes like, why can't companies do this, or why can't the developers do that, right? Like, there's a lot of problems in games that like you would think, even for people who are also like coders and programmers themselves, they're like, I can do this in 5 minutes, why does the company take so long to get it fixed? There's a video regarding player feedback that sums it up quite well in good detail. Usually, what the general community thinks is good for a game may not actually procure the results that you think that you're expecting. There are some instances, for example, everyone wants Earth, right? Let's say in League of Legends. I know this isn't realm related, but everyone wants Earth. Everyone wants Ultra Rapid Fire to be on constantly. They never want Earth to go away. But as Riot explained when they released the infographic, that players actually quit after playing Earth. Like, they don't go back to playing the regular game because they're so burnt. Either they're burned out from things going really quickly, or they just, after playing Earth, they don't find regular League of Legends that fun. Oftentimes, the reason why a lot of developers don't listen to us, apart from just furthering their own agenda, you also have to remember that we have our own design philosophy and they have theirs, and sometimes that conflicts, which is why developers may not want to listen to us, because they think the game should be played this way while we think the game should be played in another way. And that opinion differs from gamer to gamer. Each player has their own, I guess, viewpoint on how a game is meant to be designed and how it's meant to be played. But the thing is, we often think with our heart, not with our head. And that's not necessarily a bad thing, because it shows that we have passion for the game, right? A lot of players, they genuinely care and want to see the best in whatever they're doing, right? Like, especially for those of us who've been playing video games for a long time, we grow sentimentally attached to the games that we play. And therefore, we want to see it succeed. We want to see it do well. But because of that, we have this inherent bias towards certain aspects of the game that really resonate with us, and it could be a sentiment shared among the majority of the community, right? But there still might be a group of other players that will be adversely affected by certain changes. And it was talked about, especially in League of Legends, where people complain that X champion is overpowered and other people complain that Y champion is too underpowered and stuff like that. And when Riot actually follows through on changes suggested by the player, it causes more backlash or more negative results than positive, because one group of people were advocating that, let's say, I don't know, Jax was broken, and another group of people were saying that he was totally fine. It's difficult to sort of break away from that because, like I mentioned before, the perspective of a game designer and the perspective of a player are totally different. You really can't compare the two, because not that game designers aren't gamers themselves. In fact, most game designers are gamers. They play video games their whole life. That's why they wanted to make their own game. But it's not exactly that simple to just say, okay, why can't we make these changes for a game, since that sometimes can conflict with another thing that we're not aware of. We tend to get blinded by that since we're so, I guess, passionate about the game that we play, to the point where we kind of ignore anything else that we think is either negligible or we just don't think is a detail worth giving consideration, whereas to some people it is. There are exceptions to this, of course, mind you, in that, of course, there are some issues where the game community as a whole unanimously agree is a problem, such as in, wow, this is a stacked bag, holy crap. Although we have T15 armors now and T14 weapons, so I don't know exactly how much I care about them, but I guess we'll keep them for the time being since I still do need spares. Let's say player transparency. I'm sure there doesn't exist a single player in Realm of the Mad God that doesn't want player transparency, because there's so many cases where you die to something unfair purely because you just can't see what's going on since everyone's just sitting on top of each other. But that's the sort of exception to what I'm talking about. The 2 daggers of sinister deeds. Usually players that advocate for a certain change completely disregard the consequence of that change, in that, first of all, you can't really acknowledge that, you can't really predict that sort of stuff, because there's no way you can foresee every logistical detail in a game after a change comes about. Do I not have any inventory space? I suppose what I'm trying to say is that every time you feel like something desperately needs to happen in a game, or whether you feel like there needs to be some sort of change, or if you feel like that something is broken that needs to be fixed, understand that it's not always that simple. That's usually just surface level, I guess, details that you don't really go any further into. Like I said, back to the topic of initially what I talked about regarding people who were complaining that removing the safe spot in Celestial Phase was bad for the game. There is also a party that says that removing the safe spot was a blessing for the game because it made it so that, well, for one, now it encourages you or actively places the ultimatum on you to dodge. It makes it harder, more challenging. Some people think that might be unfair, and some people might think that was how it was intended to be from the very start. We just coincidentally found the safe spot, and so therefore Deca decided, hey, that's not intended, that's not part of the intent behind our design, that's not part of the design philosophy, and that is their right, that is their right, that is their liberty to, I guess, it's their game. They could make that decision on if we were just not playing the phase the way it was supposed to be played, and so they want to get it changed. Some people may not agree with that, but the message, I suppose, that I want you guys to take home is that, you know, just be mindful of all the factors that you can possibly conceive, as well as the sentiments of other players. Because there are a lot of fights I see people that start between people over things like, oh, this is how something should be, this is how it shouldn't be, and it bothers me because technically both sides are right, but both sides are also wrong. And I guess that applies to all arguments in general. It's usually arguments, it's both people's faults. It's very rare where it's like a he started it situation. But even so, when it comes to the developers versus the player, I think it's important that we all acknowledge each other's viewpoints because the players know things that the developers don't and vice versa. But we're sort of in this kind of toxic generation of people don't really acknowledge the other person's experience and the other person's viewpoints and stuff like that, and only seek to force and, I guess, impose their own viewpoints on them without any sort of repercussions expected whatsoever. And yeah, just TLDR, stop complaining so much. People make mountains out of molehills when it comes to a ton of different details in Realm, and let's be real, there's a lot of inconveniences with every game, and while it's important to hold the developers accountable for that, it's also important to acknowledge what is worth fighting for. Like, if you're the type of person that complains that your roommate, I don't know, arranges things in odd numbers instead of even, that's kind of being petty, you know? So, alright, anyways, we didn't get anything particularly good except for the Fire Dragon Battle Armor, but I think at this point you guys probably get the idea that I don't really do these chest openings for fancy loot anymore. I just do it to talk to you guys, to sort of engage in conversation, which is also why I don't really cut out much of the storage part, because otherwise you wouldn't be able to listen to the conversation. Although I cut out a lot in this video just because I know that there's some details that I could get rid of. Like, I can probably shave off 5 minutes of a video in terms of collecting chests and dropping them down. But also, there are reactions to rare drops. We just didn't get any for this episode. It happens, you know, some days you do better than others. We just didn't get super lucky. That's gonna be it though, guys. If you enjoyed, a rating would be much appreciated, and let me know your thoughts about what I talked about. It's, of course, very messy and all over the place. I ramble. I don't script these videos because I want it to be very natural, but I would love to hear what you think, and I guess that's gonna be it. Thank you all so much for watching, and I hope to see you again soon for the next episode. Take care.